Welcome back, everyone. This is the second video of the FlightFactor 777 feature series, and in this video I will be discussing the EFB, or Electronic Flight Bag. Hopefully this video helps clear up some confusion regarding how to use the EFB, especially since it's not the most intuitive interface, I will admit. Now, before we get started, I want to just do a few disclaimers. First off, this is in version 2.0.9 of the 777. It's an alpha build, and so there are still features missing. You know, there may be some bugs. This is not indicative of the final product. Aside from this, most of my knowledge is from testing. I am not a developer, and so the best thing I can do is to just use the aircraft often, find out any patterns, and explain it to everyone. And finally, last thing before we start, is that I am running on a laptop, once again, so if you'd notice, there are some blurry textures here, that, you know, X-Plane isn't looking as great as it can be. And that is because I'm running both OBS and X-Plane on my laptop, so you will definitely get a better experience. Anyways, that aside, let's get into it. So when you first get into the FlightFactor 777, you will be greeted by the EFB. It's already on when you get in here. And so, let's get into the physical buttons, actually. First off, you have the menu button. I'm going to go clockwise on here. So you have the menu button, and this brings you back to the main menu. So if you're in, say, any of this, menu. Boom, main menu. Second thing, you have the back button. And this brings me to an interesting logic I found, which is the up and back buttons in the EFB. So if you go into airplane or simulation or any of that, you'll see these two buttons, up and back. And these actually serve different purposes, and they work in different ways. So the back button is the same as this, and it works the same way. And so this explanation will apply to this button as well. So the up button is meant to bring you back up one submenu. So let's say if we're in the maintenance submenu, if you click up, it's gonna bring you to airplane, which is the broader menu. If you click up, it's gonna bring you back to main menu. Now the back button is more of, how would I describe it? I'd say it's more of an undo button, somewhat. So it brings you back to the last screen you were in, and it doesn't have to follow the submenu system. So how would I explain this? How would I visualize it? I'd say go to maintenance, tests, avionics tests, GPWS. This is like dead end. This is just one toggle. You know, you can't go any further. There's no more submenus past this. If you click up, it's going to go to maintenance, up, back to airplane. But if you click up, then back, it's going to go back to avionics tests. However, after that, if you click back again, maintenance, back, airplane. So that's what I mean. It's more of an undo button than it is a, like, go up one submenu button. And that's why they have these two options. Anyways, with that navigation aside, we also have the page up and page down keys. These are more important, I'd say, for the search functions. So like airport map has a search, documents function. This is what they're used for. There's a transfer key, where I haven't really tested this all that much, but according to the tooltip on the bottom left, it has something to do with the first officer's display, so I don't know. I'm not gonna go into it because I haven't tested it. Same thing with the enter key. I haven't tested it, and by the sounds of it, most people are going to be using they're just going to directly click on the screen anyways. So I don't think enter would really make a difference here. Anyways, aside from that, we also have the power button. This turns it off, on, no warm up, nothing. It just turns it off or on. It's fine. After that, we have the line select keys, and these do work, so these are linked. If you click that, the line select key beside pilot utilities is going to go there. If you click it beside temperature conversion, it's going to go there. If you click simplified loading, it's going to go there. After that, we have more navigation keys, but I'd say this is more for the airport map itself. So we have up, down, left, right arrow keys, and this would be to move the map around, where, you know, page up, page down. I'm not sure if they do anything, but if they do, then it would just move it up and down. And the zoom keys are also for airport map or the documents page, because, you know, if you need to zoom in, get more detail, that's what they're there for. Anyways, on the left side, we have more line select keys, and then we have our brightness display. Now, honestly, I never really used the brightness display before. However, in 12.1.0 for X-Plane, so X-Plane 12.1.0, I find it really helpful, especially since the bloom's a bit more exaggerated and it makes it hard to read. So with the dim button, you can spam, it's gonna get darker, but you can also hold. So you don't have to worry about that, just hold it, it's gonna be fine. And so those are the physical buttons on the EFB, which brings us to the software. Now, when you first load in to the FlightFactor 777, you're going to be met by this main menu. And there are a bunch of options here, like, honestly. And I'm going to go discuss these options from left to right, up to down. So we're going to go airport map to Ident Page, then terminal charts to Initialize. Although I don't have to talk about terminal charts, but anyways. First off, you have the airport map. When you get into the airport map, you will be met by this page, empty. Just, yeah, it's just a bunch of navigation. And so, you have these previous, next, search ident, search all buttons, and also cancel. And these will help you just get an airport, because as far as I know, this airport map does not automatically detect the airport where you're at. It knows where you are on the airport premises, but if you're, let's say, landing at an airport, it's not going to automatically switch. So, there are two ways to search. There's the search ident and search all. Now, these vary because of the names of airports. So, if I go, let's say Vancouver, because we're at Vancouver right now. Let me type Victor Alpha November. If I click on ident, it's going to show everything with Victor Alpha November in the ICAO code or in the IATA code. And as you can see, there's not as much searches. Vancouver Airport doesn't even show up on here. However, if I click search all, you now get more pages. You can click next, previous, page up, page down does things. Okay, arrows don't do anything, but you can also scroll using your mouse. And one of the first ones you see, Vancouver International. So that's the difference you make with this search ident or search all. And remember that you don't have to type the whole thing. I just type Victor Alpha November and it still shows up. Anyways, let's get into Vancouver. Click this. And here is your airport map. So, first off, you can always go back to the airport search by clicking here. Cancel brings you back to the map. You can also hide this menu. So, let's break this map down. So, you have your north up mode. This changes. There's another option that shows up later on, but I'll discuss that. Yeah, so north up you have your ICAO code for the airport, and you also have true. Now, it says here true because it's in reference to true north, not magnetic north. And because of that, there's a little icon here that has your magnetic declination. Now, there are also some other options here. So there's center map. You know, if you move it around, you can center it. It's also cancel messages. Those are in regards to these two. So you can always recall it, cancel, recall. And then you can also hide this menu. Now, why do we have messages on here? It says here ADIRU data, enable position accuracy. And the reason for that is that this detects where your aircraft is on the premises. So if you search up Vancouver and you're at Vancouver and your ADIRU is aligned, then it'll show up in an arrow and you can actually center the airport map around your aircraft and it will rotate with the aircraft. It's a separate option that pops up when ADIRU is aligned. But aside from that, we can do most of this while the aircraft is off. Now you also have your plain text name at the bottom, Vancouver International, and on the left side you have the range, so 5.6 kilometers for everything. For the scale, zoom in 3.7. So on this map, you have all of your taxiways listed, and it repeats every now and then, so you can zoom in a bit more if you want, and you know, yeah, this is the max you can go. Yeah, you're not gonna forget that you're on Lima, for example. You also have your runways. They're in this blue oval. And you also have the other side listed on here. See, if I move it, it's gonna show, and it actually intersects every now and then, which is, it's nice. Also, if you scroll up, you'll see that there are the stand numbers that show up. Now, for this, I believe the airport map refers to the global data in X-Plane, not your custom sceneries. I'm not too sure about this, and obviously they might change it. The first version of the map had reference to the custom sceneries, and that caused some issues. So if there's an issue, just reach out to the FlightFactor team. Anyways, that's the airport map. Let's go back to the main menu. Afterwards, you get two options. You get performance and briefing. Performance is the performance calculator. It's not yet in 2.0.9, so I'm not going to discuss it because I don't know how FlightFactor will implement it. Now, after that, we have briefing. And briefing is grayed out because this is a Simbrief briefing. And so for that, to enable it, you need to go into Navigraph services and get data from Simbrief. Now, the thing with this is that if you get data from Simbrief, it's not going to actually get your data unless you have the model matched. So in Simbrief, you have to select 777, in this case, -200ER, and aside from that, it's not gonna do anything. But once you get the data, you can see success has my details, up, briefing is now unlocked. And in briefing mode, you have all of these things. And the nice thing about FlightFactor is that they actually parse your data. So it's not just the PDF. If you go to flight plan overview, it actually does everything here. So you have your flight number. You have, yeah, it's just the dates, because I haven't flown in a bit. And you have your routing. You have the aircraft type. You have the off blocks time and just anticipated, estimated block time, estimated, yeah, arrival times and everything. You have your alternates. And you also have your routing here. So you have your flight level, Fraser 7, Vancouver, yada yada, routing. You also have your alternate routes, your cost index, ground distance, air distance, average winds, ISA, fuel bias that you selected, all of that. if you go to ICAO flight plan, it parses it down even more. It reduces it even more. So you have your routing, you have your equipment codes, you have the airport timing, you also have, yeah, airport timing, you also have your alternatives, PBN, all of that stuff. If you go to Nav Log, this will basically go into your nav data in the Simbrief flight plan. So in Simbrief, when you generate a flight plan, there's a part with all the nav data, so it tells you which waypoint is where, which VOR is where, what's their coordinates, and what time you're supposed to be there, all of that. And the cool thing about this is that in the nav log, you can see there are boxes you can enter. So these are for time checks, fuel checks. So, for example, yeah, we have 006, 007. So these are the estimated times between. So from Vancouver to Charlie Foxtrot Golf Foxtrot X-ray. It's not going to take all that long. And we can enter what time we actually get there. So let's say 23:11. Let's say we get there at, I don't know, 23:14. Boom. You can do your time checks. And you can also do your fuel checks. So we're supposed to have 41.3 by then. We should have burned around 4.3. So it depends on how you do procedures, I guess. Yeah, it depends on how you do your procedures. You can enter any number you want. You know, it doesn't really matter. So if you want to enter, yeah, how much fuel you've burned. Yeah, let's say we burned 4.3. Boom. Correlates. That's a nav log. You also have your NOTAMs. And this parses all of your NOTAMs. So Vancouver, origin, you see you have all of your NOTAMs. You can check all of it down here. You also have your destination. If you click it, destination NOTAMs. You can check all of it here. Boom. Alternates. It even has your alternate NOTAMs. And it has it for all of your alternates. So you should be fine. After that, there's weather. Weather is your METARs, your TAFs, temporary updates, all of that. Origin, destination, alternates. It's pretty self-explanatory. There's also winds, where it tells you what winds are expected for your climb, top of climb, descent, top of descent, all of that. Now, on the right side of the briefing, you'll find your weights. And this has all of your estimated weights for... Yeah, this has your estimated weights for Simbrief and for the aircraft. So you have how many passengers, cargo, payload, zero fuel weight, how much fuel you need, how much is maximum. And for fuel, you have your full breakdown of fuel, trip info, contingency, alternative, final reserves, ETOPS, all of that. And you have your block fuel in a separate column, with like a separate row, which is really nice. So that's the briefing, and also Navigraph services, which brings us on to airplane. And so, this is a really important distinction I want to make. Airplane is for your settings within the simulator. Simulation is for your options with the aircraft. So how would I explain this? Is that I would say from the perspective of the pilot, you would be using airplane most of the time. So this is stuff like, yeah, your doors, ground service, weight and balance, your minimum equipment list, all of those. Whereas with simulation, it's your aircraft options. So it's stuff like cabin configuration. It's not how much like passengers you're carrying. No, it's how much seats you have in the aircraft. Cargo hold configuration, it's not how much cargo you're actually carrying, it's how much cargo you can carry, and if they're in a different configuration. So you have your other general settings on here. This is basically the the startup widget and everything. So if you have any concerns about whether where a menu is, think about that. Airplane is what you need during operation, and simulation is basically you're breaking the fourth wall. What are the parameters of the operation itself? Like, what environment does the operation occur in? So, with that in mind, let's go into airplane. And so airplane, you have all of these menus. Doors, pretty self-explanatory. You can open doors. There's an accessory door. You can have all of these doors. You can also arm the doors from here, and you can also set to emergency ops. So one thing I note is that if the doors are armed, you cannot open them unless you are in emergency ops. So if you're going to deploy the slides, you need to take that extra step of declaring emergency ops. But I'll go further into that in the communications video. This is more on the EFB. Anyways, we also have ground service. Ground services is where you call everything. There are 2 pages to this. So you can call your GPUs, chocks, bus, stairs, all of that. Next page, gear service, pneumatic, engine maintenance, all of that. And FlightFactor lays all of these icons out based on where they would appear. So for example, the fuel is actually connected by the line to the left wing. So this is the left fuel tank, fuel truck. This is the right fuel truck. And this more concerns you if you're talking about catering. Because with the 777, you can load catering from, I believe, one right. You can also do it from the rear doors, but you can also do it from the rear left. And FlightFactor shows to do it from the rear left. So that's all the ground services. There's weight and balance as well. Weight and balance is where you're going to get into all of your loading, all of that. So first off, we have simplified zero fuel weight. This basically disables Pax, cargo, and fuel load. It just lets you do a total number of, what zero fuel weight do you want? What total fuel do you want? You can also fill from Simbrief, and it's gonna immediately just select simplified zero fuel weight. So there's that. There's also fuel planning, where you can basically just think about how much you want, how much trip fuel you need, all of that. And an important thing to note is that with these settings and with most others, is that you can click, you can scroll, but you can also click on the bar itself and you can type. And that makes it a real time saver. Now, these options at the bottom are just going to different pages, which are accessible from up there. So I'm going to just keep going. There is also weight summary. The weight summary page is like a load sheet. This is basically this is some of the information that will show up in the load sheet when it comes in after you load. That's a whole different thing to talk about, but all I'll say is that this is similar information to what will appear there. Afterwards, you have your Pax Load, cargo load, and fuel load. I don't know, this is where I find things to start getting fun, So you have your passenger loading. You can select crew members. You can select business class, how much. You can see it affects your weight, economy class. And you can also change the passenger distribution. Now, why I find this to start getting interesting is because if you see right here, first class is grayed out. Okay, you can't select it. And that is because of the cabin configuration. So this is where it starts going back into simulation, because, you know, you're not changing seats every time you fly in real life. So in simulation, you can change your cabin configuration, add a row of first class if you want, and when you go back into weight and balance, passenger loading, now you can add first class. Now you have first class passengers. But anyways, this also applies to the cargo load system. So you can select your hold cargo, how much is in the hold. This is like your total for everything. You can select how many LD3 containers you have, how many pallets you have, how much bulk cargo you have. But remember that this also is dependent on configuration. So if you go to simulation, cargo hold configuration, you can say, oh no, I just want to do LD3, just LD3 containers, no pallets. But the front, I want it to be free load. So just free cargo, no containers. And so, if you go back up to weight and balance and cargo load, you'll see it changes. Free place luggage. It starts changing. And in the lower portion, in the aft of the aircraft, you can see it's just LD3 containers. So it does affect things. And actually, there is a shortcut to cargo configuration from here. So free load, boom. And this is also where the back button comes in handy, because if you press up from cargo hold configuration, it's going to go back to simulation. If you click back, you're back in the cargo loading system. And then up, now you're back in weight and balance. So it saves time. Anyways, fuel load, this, you know, self-explanatory. Depending on the option, there is an option for an auxiliary fuel tank in the plugin menu. However, it cannot be filled. I trust that this is because it's the 200 ER, and so if you go for like a -200 LR, it's gonna be available and you can fill it up. They probably just wanted to have it in as soon as possible. Just, you know, build the foundations. But anyways, these passenger loading, cargo loading, fuel loading, it's just a start, you know? It's just where you fill in how much you need. There's still center of gravity. You choose the center of gravity, your weights. You can actually change your total fuel here. There's a graph here. You can change it to Mac view. Brings you back to fuel load, weight summary, cargo load. But you can also optimize your center of gravity, so it changes the distribution of passengers or cargo, and that really helps. And I'd recommend you actually optimize it first before you go into the loading page. So the loading page is separate from these, because in these pages you can see it just tells you the ones you want, like the amount of passengers you want in the aircraft. Whereas in the loading page is where you actually start to load them.
Captain, I believe you need to say hello to establish contact with them.
And our first officer is... Okay. And yeah, our first officer was noting, because I clicked on the load button, that in this case I need to contact ground personnel first. But aside from this, you can also request fuel samples, simultaneous full loads. When you get into the actual submenus, it gets pretty intuitive. It's just that the actual menu system is not too great. Anyways, that's the loading service. So after weight and balance, there's also a maintenance page. This is where you go into most of your things. So you have your galleys, restrooms, hydraulics. You can check all of these systems. Right now they're grayed out. I trust it's because the aircraft is powered off. Let me power it on real quick. And let me just call the GPUs.
Terrain.
That these will be available soon. Okay, so the maintenance page is... We'll get back to this.
Pull up.
After this, there's your pushback. And pushback is one of the coolest features I find in this aircraft. So pushback, you get to start your pushback, which calls the ground configure, like you call the ground personnel and it spawns in your pushback truck. I will discuss that in a later video, but yeah, it calls in pushback. You can switch direction, but there's also a GUI when you're in the pushback truck, so I don't really use it. End process and wave it off. So you need to end the process. Ending the process will get the ground personnel to show you the pin, and then you have to wave them off to get rid of them. So there's also the pullback, where the truck spawns in a pulling configuration. And so it's basically a tow, but honestly, it doesn't really matter all that much. You can just switch the direction. And disconnect, connect. Pretty self-explanatory. You can also call the ground crew from here, which is pretty... I'd say it's pretty convenient, but...
Please ask the ground personnel to approach.
Will do over the radio.
There we go. So that's the pushback menu, and I think it's best if I just call the ground crew here. I'll get into the communication side in a later video, but right now this is just what I need to do right now.
Hello, this is the captain speaking.
Good to hear you, sir. The ground personnel is at your service.
Okay, so now that that's that, see, now you can see, since we're connected to the ground personnel, the maintenance tab is now unlocked. And in this maintenance tab, remember we are on full manual mode. You can click, for example, galleys and restrooms. It's gonna show this diagram. Here's all of your black water and non-potable water stores. So you can drain the lavatory, you can also replenish the non-potable water, and it tells you all of the information you need to know. But same thing with, say, gear and tires. You'll see there's your main gear, your gear cycles. You can change it, you can replenish the gear cycles by doing maintenance. You can replenish the tire pressure, all of that. And same goes for most of the other stuff, you know, electrical, oxygen systems. That's that. Those are the systems. And if you're in per system mode, I believe how it's supposed to work is when you're in this maintenance mode, you just click here. I don't think it's going to bring you to the diagram page, but it's just going to call all related maintenance for that. But anyways, that's that. You can also have a option to general options, so you can again go from full manual to none or full automatic or whatever you need. And that brings us to the right column, where we have our hatch inspection. This is basically showing you most of the hatches on here. I believe this works similarly to the Walkaround feature, which we'll get into in a future video, but just short summary, that you can check, so you can open or close this. You can open or close these hatches in the hatch inspection by clicking the left button. On the right bottom button, you can go there, so it will physically move your camera there. Anyways, that is the hatch inspection tab. So we're gonna go back up. There's also a general maintenance queue, which basically tells the ground personnel, just, you know, you figure it out. And again, you have your tests. GPWS is the only thing here, because I believe GPWS can be triggered by ground personnel. Pilots don't have to do it, and I don't think the pilots can. Afterwards, you have instantaneous full maintenance and current list, so it's self-explanatory there. Anyways, afterwards, we've already discussed pushback, so let's go into cabin controls. Cabin controls is, as it says, cabin controls. You can go to climate control. You can overwrite and change the temperature of certain zones in the cabin. And aside from that, it's just going to tell you what the master setting is at. So it's more like a flight attendant panel, if anything. There's also cabin light controls, and there are different types of lights here. So you have your main cabin lighting. This is the white lighting, just lights everything up. You have the ambient cabin lighting, which is a blue light to help create a different mood, I guess, in flight. And then there's also kitchen lighting, which, you know, lights up the galleys, all that stuff. And emergency override lights is... I haven't tested this function all that much yet, so I'd leave this up to you to test. Anyways, afterwards there's water closet control, which just brings you back to the maintenance. After cabin controls, yeah, we're done with cabin controls. We have the minimum equipment list. Yeah, you can see it just tells you when to dispatch, when not to dispatch, and I believe the devs said this one's still a work in progress, so I'm not going to talk about this all that much, but just there are a lot of pages. So, yeah. Just it's a minimum equipment list. Following that, we have the training tab where it has a bunch of scenarios for you. So for example, you can do engine start, you can select right engine, say, you know, hot start, no N1 rotation. This is more of a training failure thing. Hung start. You have your engine abnormals, so if you have flame out, oh, you can select, let's say 500 feet left engine, no throttle response. You can go engine separation, all of that good stuff. There are other stuff, so hydraulics, air pressurization, icing and sensors, snow on aircraft, circuit breaker short circuit, which brings you to the failures page for all the circuit breakers. And you can fail each one of these. There are other failure scenarios which you can create. So this is the... how would I explain it? This is if you want to trigger multiple failures at the same time. So let's say if you want to do a bird strike, but that bird strike causes dual engine failure. Yeah, you create it here. So other stuff in the training menu are the ground and interflight failures. So if you want to install the left gear pin, if you want them to forget it, boom. Yeah, other training stuff. Oh, there's also training positions. So you can select, let's say CYVR, you can select the runway, and you can spawn in different configurations. So like, let's say ILS, you can do takeoff, final, base vectors, all of that. You can also select which star you're on, you know, approaches, fixes, all of that. And there is position freeze. Now what this does, it just pauses the simulator without pausing the simulator. It pauses your aircraft without pausing the simulator. So that's training. Brings us to failure controls. I believe you would have seen some of these from the training scenarios. So you can go to all failures. You have a search function here. Let's go pitot, boom. And yeah, so the way this works is you have your system here. You have inactive, which means there's no failure there, and you have more than 14 days. And this is the like estimated time before something triggers a failure. So for example, I have random failures triggered, and so if I check here, this is the radio altimeter left short circuit. And since I have this on like 100 hours, right now I have 96 hours left before this fails. And if I check other things, yeah, there are some other failures that are supposed to happen. Left channel 2 image generator, 203 hours. EEC, right overheat, 176 hours. These are your failures. And you can also select failed only. Okay, so yeah, I believe that covers the failures because like it's a similar layout to most of these. You also have your reset all failures here. But aside from that, it's the same UI. Okay, after this, on the right side, we also have Captain's Commands. And this is pretty important, I would say. So Captain's Commands is basically some of the commands you would be giving over the radio. So yeah, if you want to insert the pins, it's on here. If you want to cut off the ground, so like just cut off communication with the ground, you click this. If you want to stay in communication with the ground, but you want to remove all personnel from the aircraft, say you're about to pressurize your hydraulics, click this. You can request de-icing. You can request them to remove all ground equipment. You can request them to close hatches. But you can also request a pre-flight briefing. And this simulates a pre-flight briefing you would have with your first officer. So you would need to have your V1 set, your MCP set, FMC set before you click this. But when you do click this, it's basically going to go through the briefing, and it's really cool. So I would suggest you do that on every flight. Anyways, after that, we're still in the airplane tab, remember? We're in walk-around mode. So I'm going to go into this in the dedicated walk-around video. But this basically is a checklist of what you should check. So you can check, yeah, you can tick stuff off your list, see if it's working or not. Move your camera with this button, and on the top button it's going to tell you what you're supposed to do. I will demonstrate that in the dedicated walk-around video. Again, I got confused here for a second, but airplane mode, there's also a shortcut to loading services again. So you can load fuel, all of that stuff. You also have your ongoing processes. Yeah, ongoing processes would be your active processes. So if you have a maintenance thing, for example, replacing your gears, or if you're just changing a tire, it's going to tell you they're doing this right now. Ongoing processes. And finally, in the airplane tab, you have the option to instantly align the ADIRUs. So if you don't want to wait, but you also don't want to change your time factor, then you can just immediately align. Now, this brings us to the simulation page, which is all of your options. So, in the simulation page, we have general, cabin config, cargo hold config, avionics config, ground operations, all of this. So, let's get started with general. General is basically what you would find in the startup. However, there are some other stuff, so there's pilot in command's name. So, on the load sheet, it will change the name depending on which name you place here. So you can just change that. You also have, I believe this is just for the alpha, but there's also an offer me beta versions when available. And you can also re-enable the widget whenever you load up the aircraft. You can also enable ground crew forget hatches. So I believe it would be randomized, but every now and then, if you ask them to close the hatches, they would forget something, and that would affect their flight. And finally, on here you have restore consumables to default value. So if you want to carry consumables to the next flight, but for any reason you want an insta fix, boom, restore consumables. So after that, we have your cabin configuration. I'm gonna go further into this in a separate video, but this is where you choose how many seats and what type of seats you have. So, in this case, we can say first class, we want as many as we can. And as you can see, first class goes only up till the second doors. Whereas, if you want business class, you can make the whole aircraft business class. You can make the whole aircraft economy class. And you can do a mix. There are also presets here. So cabin type, you can do single class. You can do 2 class, 3 class, Emirates, or Turkish Airlines. And as you can see here, if you click on Emirates, the first class actually changes in icon. I will get more into that in the other video. But that's cabin configuration. So now we move on to cargo hold, where again you select, do you want all pallets? Do you want all containers? Do you want a mix? Do you want this to just be free luggage, like the individually placed without a container? Like you are the boss in this case. Following this, you have Avionics. I'm not going to go into all of the options you have here, but you can change stuff on your EFIS. You can change the segment displays, standby instruments, RAS. You can this is in Avionics, this is where your option for kilograms or pounds are. And you also have other things. Now, from there, you go into ground operations. And this is where you get into some of the interesting options. So for example, ground personnel on the ramp. So this is like your 3D models. So you can disable it. You can also change where your tug starts. I will note that with automatic mode, it's going to be connected to the aircraft when you spawn in. Whereas with the manual modes, you will have to go up to the aircraft and connect on your own. Aside from that, you also have default tug camera. Doesn't really matter, you can change this when you actually get there, so that's fine. Those are the pushbacks stuff. There are also a few options here, so there's tug instruments on screen. This is the GUI, I just keep it on. There's a tug speed limit. You can disable that. I have it disabled. And hard collision. And if you have this enabled, you will damage the plane. If you go too fast, just crash into the wheel, it's going to collapse. So I recommend keeping this on, but be careful. Aside from this, there are other stuff. There's connect via gate. So this is the selection between jetways or stairs. We do need an option where you can just hide everything and use SAM jetways, for example. But right now, this is what we have. And service vehicles appear from above. Yeah, I do not think this works right now. I've tested it with both. It does not work right now. But that's ground operations. There's also situations, which is basically your saves. So I'm not sure if it saves your position, but it saves like panel states. So if I say like, yeah, let's go cold and dark. You can save it, boom. You can reload it. You can use the state on reload. You can just load it. Everything. And yeah, it will restore your panel state. Aside from this is Luagit. I'm not too sure why I have this enabled, but it's a different compilation process. There's also factory defaults, so if you want to reset all of your options, just click that. You can change graphics, effects, and sound. So if you want the automatic window blinds, that's where it is. You can change your pilot's height, which actually does somewhat affect the camera position. Yeah, you can also adjust the seat height. You can move on outer view on ground. Yeah, these are your graphics options. It's also the interaction options. And what I mean by interaction here is how you interact with the aircraft. And the reason I want to distinguish this is because you also have crew interaction. So crew interaction is how you talk with other crew members. You can disable it completely. You can ask for assistance. And you can also just, yeah, do all of these with crew. Whereas in interaction, it's how you deal with the aircraft. So it's like if you want a mouse wheel, if you want to, like, just, if you have to click it before you do the mouse wheel or anything, throttle blocks, yeah, you can overpower the thrust levers, everything. So those are the interaction options and crew interaction options. There's also subtitle options, and change, yeah, it's subtitles. You know, if you talk to crew, there will be subtitles. You can disable it. You can change how long it like how it looks, everything. Checklist options, which goes into the checklist feature. I will discuss that feature in a separate video. There's also the equipment tab, which is your cabin equipped with gaseous oxygen system. But it's also where you set your cockpit door code, because this actually works. If you set a number here and you close the door in flight, and like the door is not set to unlocked, then you need to enter the door code and it will open it will unlock the door. But that's where it is, simulation. From here, Ident Page, this is like database stuff, you know, whatever works. And this is one of those times where you want to click menu or back physically. Anyways, let's talk about the right side. We have the terminal charts. In the terminal charts, this is navgraph charts, so it's not yet implemented, but this is where it would be. You have documents, which is where you have your manual. So you can always refer to the aircraft manual from here. You also have an FCOM here, which you can refer to. No search function, unfortunately, but you can view bookmarks, you can save bookmarks. It works. There's also a cockpit guide, PDF, so if you want to just place stuff in there, I'm sure it'll work. Anyways, let's go back to menu. Video. This is where your flight deck camera is gonna be, because there's a camera outside the flight deck entry door. I do not know if this will be implemented, but I trust it will, because there's an option there. So that's that. There's also pilot utilities. We're almost done. So pilot utilities is where you have a bunch of convergence stuff. So non-takeoff performance, non-performance related calculations. So you have a timer here as well. You have general calculator, it's not yet here. But you also have speed conversions. You can go from knot to kilometers an hour, miles an hour. You can go length, feet to nautical miles. You can go 85. 85,000 feet goes up to 14 nautical miles. You have time zone conversions, which is useful for long hauls, but if you're doing flight sim, then not necessarily, but this is useful in real life. Those are pilot utilities. You also have simplified loading. Simplified loading it's basically a simplified version of the weight and balance page. And it puts everything in front of you. So you can fill from Simbrief, you can load the airplane, just one button. Yeah, and you can just select everything and it has your planned load here. So the last part is, aside from Initialize Flight, which Initialize Flight basically resets the EFB itself. So you can just resets things on the EFB side. It doesn't reset your FMC or anything. But that brings us to the last part, which is shortcuts. Shortcuts are basically camera views. So you can go to different doors, you can go to cockpit, crew rest area, cargo doors. These are just easy ways to get there. So if I click front cargo door, brings me directly goes directly to the front cargo door. And so on and so forth. But anyway, that is the EFB, and I hope this video was informative. I hope it helped you. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Next video will be about the communications in the FlightFactor. So hope to see you then.